Do you feel like what's happened in Walker County has people who would ordinarily be in that right-wing bubble ready to explore some level of change?
Oh, absolutely. I think the majority of people who are calling for justice and accountability in the situation that we see showing up to protests, showing up to vigils, commenting on social media, those are people who are typically, they're not defund the police people. And that's been an interesting rhetoric to hear, because it's like that's the kind of thing the sheriff's department has thrown out, like, oh, these are just defund the police, all this stuff, when the majority of these people are not. They're like longtime voting Republicans, or people who just have no, or supporters of law enforcement who see the corruption and not only see the corruption but just see the gaps and see how the way we're doing things isn't working and we need something different.
Alrighty, welcome in Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon and
David Person.
How are you, Dave?
It's a good day, man. I'm feeling good. How about you?
Oh, not too bad. Not too bad. It is. I'm hopeful that we got maybe one more day. We record this on Wednesday, so we got maybe one more day of our monsoon season left before it moves out and we usher in the mid 90s and the 97% humidity, and all the days get to be wonderful, just like I like them. Oh man, I can't wait. I love it. I went running. So the other day I went running and it was 89 degrees and it had to be 95% humidity. I mean, it had to have been before I'm just walking from the truck, because I go and run the Swan Creek Greenway a lot over in Athens. I don't know if you're up from this way. If you've never gone, look it up. I'm telling you, it's a great little track. It runs, especially if you're a runner. It runs through. I would say 60% of it, 65% of it is shaded by trees and stuff. So you're running through the forest right along the little creek that runs through there. I mean, it's very nice. And by the time I got back to the truck, I ran, it's right at 7 miles or so. And so by the time I got back to the truck, man, I looked like somebody had sprayed me down with a water hose. I mean, and it was so awesome. It was so awesome, man. You can't beat it. Yeah, sunshine and the sweat and the running and the whole thing. Oh, it's fantastic. It's listen to a nice long podcast. It's a little bit older. I love I'm basically a housewife, and so I love the true crime stuff. And I got a nice one that slipped past me, but was very popular. Your Own Backyard, and of course I've listened to your the podcast that you were a part of when you left us for a little while.
I didn't leave.
No, I'm just kidding. But it was great. Finding Tamika. It was a great podcast. If anybody's looking,
thank you.
Of course, you're here on this one, so you've also got a great podcast to listen to. And
absolutely. Sure
and one of the reasons you have that podcast is our friends at Wind Creek Entertainment. And we need to thank them for what they do. And we're going to have Stephanie Bryan on next week. She's a chairwoman of the Porch Creeks, and talked to her a little bit last week. And she was, honestly, because they never say, I swear to God, they never say anything to us about the podcast. They never say, hey, could you mention X, Y, or Z? They never say, hey, we don't like it that you did this, or we could you do this, or could you change? They never do that. Okay. They just say, hey, we like, and she did that the other week. And it always surprises me when her, Arthur, or some of the other folks within the Porch Creeks, on the reservation or within the tribe or whatever, they call or they'll send me a message or whatever. Or we're talking and they're like, hey, I listened to the podcast last week. Really great. And she said that. She said, y'all do such a great job with that podcast. And we really are happy with the way y'all handle yourselves and stuff. And I'm like, holy crap.
Awesome.
It's just, it is very, very nice. And we do appreciate what they do. It's that, as I've said many times before, they're the best kind of sponsors. They appreciate the information getting out there. They think that, listen, they'll tell you themselves that they are more conservative-minded people than they are liberal-minded people. Okay, that comes a lot from the faith. They're kind of a faith-based community on the reservation, but they also value having both sides out there. They think that it's necessary to understand both sides and get a full picture of things because they suffered from not having both sides and for people not listening to both sides of the things. And so that's kind of ingrained, and we really appreciate what they do, not just for us, but for the rest of the state. They've made some acquisitions here lately that have expanded even more so the number of people they hire and the amount of tax dollars and revenue they bring to the state. And we really do appreciate everything that they do. Listen, go look them up. I've told you many times, break up that trip to the beach, hit the resorts, or just go and stay, go over, have a good time. Wetumpka, Atmore, Montgomery.
Yes.
Go to any of those places. You're going to have a good time. The resort, I stayed at the resort in Atmore not long ago. It's top notch. I ate at Fire. Get the Cheesecake Tower. You will not regret the Cheesecake Tower. Well, you'll probably regret the Cheesecake Tower when you're trying to run it off, but while you're eating it, you will not regret the Cheesecake Tower. Okay.
Right.
Look them up online, Wind Creek Entertainment, and book a stay there and have a good time. All right. Let's get into a little bit of just, man, I went and did something that I very rarely do. And people who have tried to get me to do this know that I very rarely do it. And that is I went to speak to a group of people.
Very good.
This one, and I had to travel out of state to do it. So I went to Tennessee, Marion County Democratic Party in Tennessee, South Pittsburgh.
Where's Marion County?
It's South Pittsburgh, Jasper, kind of in the. So if you're
Western. Sort of western?
Well, like the northwest Alabama. Right,
no. Yeah. South Pittsburgh. Sorry.
South Pittsburgh.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay,
and so,
gotcha.
you're headed to Chattanooga, but right about the time you cross the state line off of 72 there, you get to South Pittsburgh and Jasper and some of those places there. And so anyways, we spoke a very, very great group of people. And listen, I don't do it not because I find people to be a burden or anything. It's just I think it's like a little bit of personal anxiety, and it's like comfort zone type thing. And I don't know, man. I've never really cared for it. And it was, and I don't, it's weird. I don't have. So I'm not nervous about standing up in front of the people and talking to them. It doesn't scare me, or it doesn't make me nervous to do it, or I don't get that fear of that. But throughout the day, I think it's just the wrecking of the routine that gets me. I don't know, but I have the anxiety, and it's I don't know, and it's really
You're saying you have anxiety leading up to it, but then once you get up in front of the people, you're okay.
Yes, I'm perfectly fine. Yeah, once I do it, I'm standing there and I'm fine. But it's messing with the routine and kind of getting outside of myself a little bit, And so,
is that why you stood me up when we were supposed to speak to the Madison County Democratic women, and I ended up doing that gig by myself because you didn't show up, Josh? I forgot to chastise you about that or inquire about what happened. I mean, you just flat didn't show up. This was months ago. I forgot about it until you mentioned that you'd spoken in Tennessee, and I was like, huh. Oh, really?
I have a vague memory of you asking me and sending me all of the information that I needed to do this.
I did.
And I swear to God, this is the first time I've thought about it. Maybe that subconsciously, maybe I did. Maybe that was part of it. Or I am now an old person who forgets things. And one of those things definitely was at play, but I sincerely apologize to both you and them. I really did not mean to stand you up on that. I did not.
I knew something must have come up. All I know is I kept looking, hoping to see you walk through the door, and you never did. And finally, I just had to. It was time, and I had to just do
it. Yeah. That's terrible of me. I owe you one. So next time you have a speaking engagement that you do not want to do, just call me, and I owe you a fill-in. Yeah, I owe you a
All
fill-in.
right. I will hold you to that.
Yeah, but listen, do it last minute so I don't have time to be anxious about it. So, But yeah, so we talked a lot about just and here's the other thing. I don't do speeches. I don't feel like I qualify to do speeches to people. I don't feel like I could talk to people. I feel like I'm talking down when I do that. And so what I typically do is a Q&A sort of thing. And we just have I tell them we're going to have a discussion. And if you don't ask me any questions, then I'm going to leave really soon. But I tell them, you're not paying me, so we're all going to get our money's worth out of this. But no matter what happens. But yeah, so everybody was engaged there, probably, 50 or so people, in the room, and, a really, really nice group of people. And, they seem to be fairly well organized up there, and, are trying to get, they're trying to get, 90, they're trying to fill, races in 90 some odd counties, up there, which is insane to me. The number of counties.
90 counties?
Yeah.
Tennessee has 90 counties?
I'm pretty sure that's what she said. Or maybe she was just saying 90 races in those counties. But I mean, I can.
Still
listen,
high,
I got the
but
Google. We can look up how many counties are in Tennessee. But
That's a lot of counties. I mean, Alabama has 67, so maybe that does make
95,
sense. I don't know.
95 counties in Tennessee.
95 counties. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Tennessee's a wide state. It stretches out there for a while.
Yeah, that's true. It does stretch. Yeah, it's a horizontal state. Yeah.
But we discussed a lot of things, and one of the things that we talked about, with my obviously background in media, was the state. They wanted to know what Democrats needed to do to kind of get things together and combat what's going on, and I told them the same thing that I've argued for a while, and that's the Democrats are going to have to create for themselves a media, PR, marketing machine that is somewhere close to the level of the one that the Republicans and right-wing folks use. All right?
Yeah.
Until you do it, and you're not going to be able to rely on the mainstream media for this sort of thing, because we've seen the acquiescence to Trump from the corporate media type folks. They, first of all, I believe that most of them secretly love Trump because it just ups their viewership and their readers, and it brings them more ad dollars. And I think they love him. I think they absolutely love the fact that Donald Trump is president again. They get another 4 years of just endless. I mean, it's endless. It's absolutely, utterly endless. It is chaos from morning to night, every single day. Every time I get the little New York Times a news alert come across my phone, and it's just sitting there, and I look at it, and I go, and I think to myself, two things: one, do I really want to open this? And two, what has that motherfucker done now? That's the two things that I automatically think, and it's always some just not, and now with the Iran-Israel conflict and the way he's handling it, and it's just, I was told that all the wars were going to be over on day one.
Exactly.
But we talked about that for a while, and and one of the examples I used, and this is what we were going to talk about to open up here, was the Minnesota assassination of the lawmakers by a crazy person, a right-wing crazy, who was upset about the abortion issue and had a hit list of people that he was going to try to take out. And he did so by impersonating an officer, showing up to their house and knocking on the door and then killing them. Did it to two different lawmakers, and one killed her and her husband and the family dog, apparently. And
I didn't hear about the family dog. Oh,
yeah,
man.
he got the dog too, shot the dog. Apparently, they had to. He didn't kill the dog. The dog was, I guess, went to defend the owners, and he shot the dog, and and so they eventually had to put the dog down because he was so injured. But within minutes of this taking place, that machinery started to churn, started to roll, started to get going, and it started with, Tim Walz appointed this guy to some sort of a bipartisan committee. I mean, it's such a nonsense committee. It was a committee that hundreds of different people have been on, and it was just anybody could have landed on that committee. It had no impact whatsoever on the actual story itself. And it was and also this lady has just recently voted with Republicans on repealing some sort of welfare for immigrants initiative that they had, and so that's probably what he was upset about. This is now those Democrats, they're crazy. That's even though it's the right wing nuts who keep killing everybody and shooting everybody, including the one who tried to kill Donald Trump, which nobody ever talks about anymore. Nobody ever talked about this dude and what happened. And it's just insane to me that we've got this person that tried to kill the president, came within, of actually pulling it off. And we never discuss it anymore. We don't have any more information really about this guy.
Well, and that to me, and I mean, this is sort of a side issue, but that to me makes the whole thing suspect. I really think we only know 10%, if that, of what the truth really is related to that whole situation. But let me say, you're talking about the way the Minnesota assassin was characterized. Of course, we came to learn that he's actually very conservative politically. What I find really reprehensible about the whole thing is bad enough what that guy did. What's even worse in my mind is what a member of the U.S. Senate did, Mike Lee, who sends out these horrible social media messages making light, trivializing, and politicizing the killing of two people and the injuring and the fact that these other two folks were injured. So you got the Hartmans who were killed, and then you got the Hoffmans who were injured, and then, like you said, the dog as well. And I mean, I'm just thinking, where have we gotten to in society where it is considered politically acceptable to make a mockery of people who were assassinated for political reasons? And then, and it's not just some nutcase in a basement, or in their grandmother's attic or something. It's a sitting U.S. senator.
Yeah, it's really abhorrent behavior of by anybody, and but you're right, to be one of 100. Of the people who are supposed to be the adults in the conversation. Yeah. That's what you hear all the time about the Senate. They're the adults. They're the the House, they're crazy, but don't worry, when you get it up to the adults in the Senate, they're going to really take a hard look. And this is the guy that you have. This is the guy that you have representing Utah, right? Utah Senator Mike Lee, isn't that where he's from? I don't understand. That was another part of this talk that we had last night. I don't understand when it became okay to reward people for stupidity. Or you know what? Maybe I should put it a different way. When did we stop punishing people for being stupid and for being wrong? That's the biggest thing. Why have we stopped punishing people for being wrong about things?
Well, can I just say, I think the last time, at least on a national political stage, that I recall it being done was when John McCain called out that woman in the audience for the things that she said about Barack Obama that were mischaracterizations. And John McCain was real clear. He's like, look, I don't agree with him politically, but this is a decent man here. And you're wrong factually about what you're saying. He's not a Muslim. Of course, McCain could have even gone further to say, as Colin Powell once said when he was being interviewed on television, and even if he was a Muslim, why is that a problem?
Right,
Nonetheless, John McCain was a decent man. I didn't agree with his politics, but he was a decent man. Ronald Reagan didn't agree with his politics, decent man. George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, who I just saw a couple of months ago here in Huntsville. And by the way, Josh, he did what you did. He didn't give a speech. He did the Q&A thing.
Yeah.
But it was very effective.
Me and George W. We're kind of on the same intellectual levels.
Yeah, I know. Y'all are buds. But decent man, George W. Bush. I never, regardless of how much I disliked his politics, disagreed vehemently with some of his decisions, and still would say his presidency was a horrible chapter in American history. He was a decent man who did, some decent things. And so I think it all changed with Trump. And I hate to just demonize one person because it's so easy to do that. It's so easy to fall into that trap. But Trump makes it really easy to do that. He makes it easy to demonize him.
Yeah,
because he seems to revel in the cruelty and the lies and just the patent evilness of things.
Yeah, well, it's also, Trump is the first one. He's our first president without shame. All right. He is absolutely our first
Excellent
president
point.
without
Excellent
shame.
point.
No matter what he says it's wrong, he just plows right through it. No matter how many times he lies and is shown that he has lied about this, it doesn't matter. He just shoots right past it. His comments about Tim Walz on the plane, about calling Tim Walz, were some of the grossest things I've ever heard a president say about anybody in any sort of situation. And if you're okay with that, then I think there's something wrong with you in the head. But it's just all part of the whole soup of Trump. And he's figured out this kind of Jackson Pollock style of approach to this, where if you just splatter enough bullshit against the canvas here, people can't pay attention to all of it at one time, and so you just can't focus on all of it at once. And so the media and the system that we had in place simply isn't strong enough. It's not built for that. It was never built to stand up to a president that has no shame, that doesn't care about being caught in a lie, that will readily lie when the truth would do just as well. That's who he is. And we weren't built to handle that. None of us were built to have. Listen, I am as guilty as anybody else, because when he was running in 2016, listen, I had such a great time making fun of this guy. I had such a wonderful time making fun of this guy. I never in a million years thought that there were enough people dumb enough in this country to vote for this clown. All right. And I'm tired of beating around the bush with it too. All right. If you voted for him at any point in time, it's stupid. All right. You've been dumb, and you're part of the problem. All right. You're part of the problem. You've been conned by a person here who only cares about himself. And he said shit that is basically playing into the worst part of you. Okay. That's what he's done. He's tapped in to the worst part of everybody that supports him. And the reason that he's done it, it's either he's tapped into the greed of you, and told you that all this other shit's okay as long as I make you enough money. Okay, as long as I make you enough money, you can overlook this other thing that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Or he's tapped into the racism of you, where, well, it's not me that's the problem in getting a job and supporting my family. It's all those other people out there that shouldn't be here or stealing my job, or who have an advantage over me. They're the reason why I can't get ahead. Not the billionaires like him who have their thumbs on the scale, who's really fucking me over every single day out there. But no, it's the immigrant or the black man or the woman or the Asian guy, or those are the people that are my problem. And that's what Trump tapped into. And that's what you see. It's kind of like that soup that runs underneath the ground in Ghostbusters. He just makes everybody worse.
Well, I think probably the vast majority of Trump voters fall into that category. I'll tell you what, I had an interesting conversation with an African-American woman who is, about my age, early 60s. She voted for Trump the first time. And I think, and she regrets it. And she didn't come from a Republican family. Her father was a Democrat. In fact, he was a preacher and a Democrat. And she basically, the way I think she explained it, she got duped. And she got duped in part, I think, by her ex-husband, who was a man of means and who had a certain way of seeing the world, especially when it comes to money and finances. And I think there are a lot of people who, and you kind of alluded to this, a lot of people who, whether it's because of greed or their belief about how the economy should sort of function, who fell into the Trump trap. But I think there are also a lot of those people. I wouldn't call them stupid. I would say they were duped. I wouldn't call them stupid. And I would also say, yes, they made a bad decision. I'm not trying to absolve them of the responsibility for their decision. But I think that they didn't have, as sometimes happens in life, they didn't have a full, they for whatever reason, they didn't have a good view, a full view. And so they fell into the trap. And I'm just thankful that there are a lot of those people, it seems, right now, who have finally awakened to see that they were wrong, you know?
Nah, I'm giving nobody a pass. I'm sorry. I mean, this is not. Listen. This is time number 2. Okay, this is time number 2, and I just I understand what you're saying, and I understand, and you're being very nice to this person because what I heard was this person and her husband were greedy. And they didn't give a shit about all of the things that were going to rain down on people because of the policies. The first time, yeah. They didn't give a shit about those people that were going to suffer because they were going to get theirs. And the reason I think they are dumb is because these are adults that we're talking about here, and they're not fully realizing the consequences of behaving in such a manner, in such a greedy, selfish manner. And to me, that's, I heard somebody say the other day, and I thought this was the most perfect way that I've ever heard anybody put it. Most every voter out there agrees on one thing. And the one thing that they agree on fundamentally, and this overrides pretty much everything else, is that we don't want the government taking our hard-earned money and giving it to people who don't deserve it. The difference between us and the people I'm talking about is we have a fundamental disagreement on who that person who doesn't deserve it is. I believe the person who doesn't deserve it is the guy that owns the yacht and is making billions of dollars. I don't think he deserves to get any more. The folks over there believe it's the welfare mom that don't, the woman who's struggling, who's she doesn't deserve the $320. We're going to cut her back to $275. We're going to figure out a way to kill the food program for summer school. We're going to figure out a way to not have free school lunches for all the children. Those are the people that they think doesn't deserve to have the money. Okay. And we believe it's those other guys that are quite comfortable and living quite well. And until some other people realize who the hell's actually taking the money from them, then we're going to continue to have this problem.
Well, I don't disagree with you. I think there are a lot of people who fall prey to that kind of thinking, and it's sort of a derivation of the old survival of the fittest kind of mentality. And we tend to lionize people that, embody that ethic or that, not ethic, but that ethos. So I get it. And I don't disagree with you. I think it's the wrong way to see the world. It's a really bad worldview. And I think sometimes people succumb to that, but I'm also glad when they come out of it. And this friend of mine, and I'll admit I was stunned when I found out she voted for Trump the first time. I was stunned.
Always makes you look at people differently, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it did for a minute, but then as we talked through it, I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna give her a pass because she was under the influence of this now ex-husband and whatever else, but. I think I think we got to give people room to put it in church nomenclature. We got to give people a chance to repent, to convert, and to be baptized. So I'm with that.
I don't disagree, but
All right.
I mean, fucking do it. All right. I mean, honest to God, look, we've seen enough at this point, you know? I mean, you know what I'm saying?
No, I'm with you.
You're being so mean to me. Yeah, you've been an asshole. You voted for assholes. You've acted like an asshole. I'm treating you like an asshole. This is what you wanted to be, okay? This is what you chose. You didn't care.
Yeah.
You were the fuck your feelings, you bunch of snowflakes guys. That's who y'all were, okay? And so now I'm treating you like that. And now you're upset and you're crying to me. And, I just want to go back to the days of that dude right there. Yeah, that my nice little bobblehead friend here, and the days of Barack Hussein Obama
too.
And that's all I want. That's all I want. I want to go back to people striving to be intelligent, to striving to be better, and to stop this downward slide that we seem to be on. I'm
with it.
Speaking of that, we have a candidate who embodies that, who's running for office on the Democratic ticket. And we're gonna go to him right now. We're gonna slide out. We'll come back. We'll get Ryan Cagle in here. Back in a minute. Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. All right. Welcome back. It's Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person, and we are happy now to be joined by Ryan Cagle. Ryan is running for Senate District 5 in the state, new candidate. We're first of all, Ryan's a minister, and I just don't know. I feel like there's going to be like some scorched skin or something the moment, if you were to win, the moment you were to walk into the State House. I don't know if you'll be able to do it or not. But man, Ryan, thanks first of all for joining us, spending some time, and also getting into the race, man, and giving candidates in Walker and all the counties in District 5, a viable candidate who actually cares about them.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and thanks for having me on.
Sure, man. Sure. Well, I guess before we, because I want to, really, I know I followed you on Facebook and stuff for the stuff that's happened with the sheriff in Walker County, Nick Smith, and the things that have gone on there, the insanity. But I guess before we get into that, this is your first time running for office. And I know I've seen some posts from some of my Democratic friends about you and about, what you've been doing and stuff. And it seems like you've gotten a fair amount of momentum, in the campaign. How have things gone? What has the experience been like? Do you completely regret it yet? How's it going, man?
Yeah, it's been a learning experience for sure. As someone who had never really foreseen myself being in kind of electoral politics, it's been quite the learning experience of just kind of hitting the ground running, trying to figure out all the nuts and bolts of how to make a campaign happen. And two is that I don't know how much of it is actually transferable, because being a special election in such a short time, it's a pretty abnormal run at a campaign, and so. But yeah, it's been a learning experience. There's a lot of personalities out there when it comes to running for election. But yeah, I don't regret it at all. And I think at the end of the day, my hope is that this will be a seed, regardless of come win or lose on Tuesday. It'll be a seed for change and showing that people in our district and people in this area that we have to contest, that we have to show up and at least provide an option for these spaces, because we haven't had democracy for this Senate seat since 2009, and even then, that's questionable. So.
Yeah, no, it is a, it's one of the things that I've argued with people about a lot. And I know that a lot of times people go into these races and they're not going to necessarily win, and they're not, and they know it from the outset, but there's something to be said for, I think for the momentum of letting people know that there are viable candidates out there. There are people that are listening to them. There are folks who are paying attention to the issues. And I feel like all along, if we do that enough, and listen, I know it's hard, and people, and I'm sitting here comfortable at the house telling people that they needed to go do some stuff. Okay, I get that. But at the same time, though, I feel like for the betterment of the party and betterment of the state, if we're going to have some success in turning things around in this state, then we got to have people like you do this, right?
Yeah, no, I absolutely think right. That's exactly right. I think from out the gate, I've said, and I can't think of the poet. The name just left me, but the quote's roughly, someone like you has to show up and fight and lose until someday someone like you can fight and win. And so
Hmm.
that's a big part of it for me is I think if you only fight battles you're going to win, then there's no point in fighting them anyway, right? And so it's an uphill
Yeah.
battle. Change is difficult. Transformation for rural communities like ours and social transformation it's difficult. It doesn't come easy, but it doesn't come by sitting on the couch and just wishing something could be better. It comes by showing up, rolling up your sleeves and putting your hand to the plow, regardless of what's going to come after that, and continuing to show up with a fidelity to your community and to your people.
Yeah. Eh, So, I'll ask you some more about the campaign, but I do want to get into what's going on with Nick Smith, and the Walker County Sheriff's Office, I guess this kind of started. Although reading some of your posts, it seems like maybe it started before Tony Mitchell, and what went on with him, and some of the other things that have happened around there. I guess can you kind of explain your involvement, and how you kind of got in the middle. I don't want to say in the middle, maybe that overplays it or overstates it, but how you became involved in what's gone on with the sheriff, and calling people's attention to some of the abuses and things that have taken place, and then I guess kind of describe what was going on.
Yeah, I come from a family of people who taught me when you see something broke, you try to fix it. When you see somebody being done wrong, you speak up. And that is the way I was raised in the world, and that is the way my faith tradition has reared me as well, to stand up and speak in the face of brokenness and harm, for repentance and for repair and for healing and those kind of things. And so, it really, I think there's a long history in Walker County, just for those that don't know, of like just abuse and corruption that goes. I mean, even the sheriff himself will talk about the corruption before him, and that this has been an ongoing thing for decades. I mean, it was just in a post a few weeks ago, he was claiming that if they could not keep him from being elected through lawfare, that they might make him disappear. So like, there's just all this, even the sheriff is putting that kind of stuff out on Facebook. Yeah, completely unhinged, right? But 2.5 years ago, Tony Mitchell, a man in our community who was having a mental health crisis, was taken into custody and abused over 2 weeks and ultimately murdered. Died from
Hmm.
hypothermia, neglect, and those kind of things. And it spiraled a few people who were actually close to Tony to begin to protesting. And then I just showed up to try to figure out how I could help. And we got to help just kind of organize and take people's outrage and figure out how we can like channel this into something for change in support of this family and support of our community. And so for 2.5 years, me and many others have been on the front lines advocating for change, advocating for accountability. We've been told, wait for all the facts, wait for all the videos. And it's just like 2.5 years out, more and more stuff just keeps coming and coming and coming out. And it's just more and more egregious and more damning in the situation. And, I've spent an inordinate amount of time over the last 2.5 years before the county commission, asking them to speak up, to do something, um, contacting Matt Woods and Greg Reed when he was still in office, and Kay Ivey and Tim Wadsworth and all of our various elected officials, and running these kind of campaigns to try to get their attention, to say like, hey, you're our elected officials. This is your community, and this is what's going on. And yeah, there's an ongoing investigation, but at this point, when over 30% of the staff at a jail have been pled guilty or indicted to the abuse or murder in some capacity of this man, it's your responsibility as an elected official to say, hey, maybe you should step down. Maybe as a sheriff, like, we've lost the plot here. We've completely gone off the rails and we need to take a step back. Unfortunately, and unsurprisingly, none of our elected officials have been willing to do that. Kay Ivey told us it was a local issue. Most of the elected officials just ignored us outright. Matt Woods, after like the 13th or the 9th plea deal came out earlier this year, offered kind of an empty platitude about it. And so really it comes down to change, and if someone, a lot of this is wrapped up. Tony was someone who was in active substance use. I lost my father to the opioid crisis. Is something that has impacted our communities greatly. And so a lot of this work with the blessing of Tony's family has also been about advocating for change on that level. There's millions of dollars coming in our communities from these national pharmaceutical lawsuits. The money is not being stewarded over well. We spent 2.5 years asking the county to use this money to actually impact the people who have affected by it. We've written proposals after proposal for non-police response teams so that the police are not the ones having to show up to mental health crises, because as Nick Smith has said very publicly and in letters to the to local judges, they're not equipped to handle the mental health crisis. We know the state is not doing their job. Incarceration is not the response to this that's doing anything good. And so there's a lot of intersecting issues in this, but it is a circus here in Walker County, unfortunately. And I've done my best to kind of keep my Senate campaign and the advocating for Tony Mitchell and those kind of things separate in a lot of ways, because I don't want anyone to think I'm trying to use that as a stepping stone, even though it is bound up in the way that I am running this campaign. Because
Hey, Ryan, let me jump in here, man. First of all, I love your passion, brother. You are extraordinarily passionate about something that, as you have already indicated, the elected officials across our state, from the governor on down, ought to be passionate about. So God bless you for that. And then secondly, speaking of God, I'm really intrigued with knowing a little bit more about, you talked about your faith tradition. I'm intrigued, and I want to know a little bit more about that. First of all, because it is very rare. I deal with a lot of pastors in my professional life and in my personal life, and I don't see many of y'all wearing nose rings, bro. So I'm like, that's automatically gives you cool points for me. I mean, you got not one nose ring, but two. So you get extra cool points. So I want to know about your faith tradition and your background. How did you get into the ministry, and what is your faith tradition?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the two nose rings, I'm glad it's extra points with you, because it's made a lot of people mad. A lot of people mad in the Senate race. I don't wear a suit. I don't even have a suit. So we'll figure that out if we win on Tuesday. But so I kind of came into the faith sideways in a little Baptist Costal church up in the Sipsey Wilderness in Empire, and came to faith there and found a community of people that just really loved me and supported me, and eventually moved from there into like the Assemblies of God. This is I'm trying to give you a very truncated version because it's long. I kind of went into the Pentecostal tradition, and that's where my deepest roots were, my most formative kind of years as a teenager. But I also was really, as a teenager, kind of inebriated on the works of like Dorothy Day and Peter Marwin, who are like the Catholic worker movement. So very big advocates for justice and social change. And so those kind of things coalesce for me in a lot of ways. But in Pentecostalism, they kind of throw you to the wolves early on. If they sense a call, I was 16 and already in the pulpit and being kind of trained, to preach and those kind of things. And so from there, I've kind of sojourned everywhere. I've hung out with United Methodists. I've hung out with Episcopalians, and finally landed in the Disciples of Christ Christian church tradition, which I was actually just ordained 2 weeks ago officially. But so Congrats, I've been in ministry. Thank you. Yeah, I've been in ministry in some capacity, in some within the church larger Christian tradition since I was 18. I took my first youth pastor position at the age of 18, which probably wasn't smart for anyone to put an 18-year-old in that position. And so that's. But my faith is just really influenced by a lot of different places. And I came up in a church of poor people. The Pentecostal church I was a part of was a house church of poor people, of people who were either in active use or in recovery. A lot of people with various mental disabilities, a lot of people with physical disabilities, elderly people. And so it was just a church made up of the people who I lived in and among, and my family and those kind of things. And so that really shaped the way I see the world and the way I understood Christianity and the way I understood faith to be.
So it sounds like you're like me. You come out of a very you approach Christianity from a very, what I would call, progressive or liberal mindset, and very social justice kind of mindset, and I like that, man. That's good to hear, because so often we who are Christians only hear about this right-wing conservative, in fact, even radically right-wing conservative evangelical approach to Christianity, which to me is antithetical to Christianity. Let me ask you about police officers and mental health, because as I listened to you talk earlier, it reminded me of some of the things that we've been dealing with here in Huntsville periodically through the years, where police officers are engaging with people who have clear mental health issues. In fact, in one tragic case, the poor fella had a flare gun to his own head, threatening to kill himself. Two police officers are trying to talk him down when another cop burst into the home and within less than 30 seconds kills the man. It seems as though there is a real problem with police officers and engaging with people with mental health issues or in mental health crises. What kind of conversations have been going on in your part of the state about that specifically?
Yeah, I think the Tony Mitchell situation has made it abundantly clear that we have to have a different approach. And that doesn't, I mean, more training for police officers, absolutely. We want them to be able to do their job safely, and as well as they can in the systems we have. But ultimately, our state is continuing to undercut funding for mental health services and just health services in general. So that creates a vacuum for the problem to be exasperated, right? And so then we have police who we have, as a society, outsourced so many jobs to them, right? And if I don't want the police to have to be showing up to mental health crisis or to basic disturbance calls where things could escalate and get out of hand. I want them to be able to focus on the things that are actually negatively, criminally impacting our community and harming our community, right? Major crimes and those kind of things. And so from the get-go, for 2.5 years ago, we proposed, like, hey, we could take this opioid funding and we could fund a non-police emergency response team that would work in conjunction with the police department. That would, is not something totally, it's work in conjunction to show up to these crises with trained professionals, whether it's mental health professionals and people who deal with people with substance use, co-concurrent issues with substance use. They could show up and respond to these things so that our police officers are able to respond to other things that they need to. They're not spending all the time doing those things. And we have trained professionals showing up, because the Tony Mitchell case is just, it's actually the third death in recent years with that department responding to a mental health episode. There was a young man, a 19-year-old by the name of Frederick Height. They called, the young man was having kind of a mental a breakdown type issue, and he ended up getting, the cop was on top of him, a 19-year-old told him he was going to shoot him and then shot him and killed him. There's another episode where a police officer from the sheriff department showed up and unloaded like 2 whole clips into a guy from 25, 30 feet away. A man named Hambrick, who had earlier been having an episode, had no weapons on him. It was just all really quick, kind of like what you're talking about, that happened up in Huntsville. And so we're clearly like we're putting police officers at risk and putting them in positions that are causing harm often, and because they don't have the training and they can't be the first line of response. And that's been my argument for 2.5 years. If anything, Walker County has proven police officers, even on their best day, cannot be the first line of response to this. That doesn't mean they're not involved. It doesn't mean, because situations do go sideways. We do, need the response in certain instances or whatever. But at the end of the day, they can't be the first line of response. For one, it puts a burden on them they're not equipped to handle. It creates just a overflowing issues, right? Because what happens, those people get incarcerated, they end up there in Tony Mitchell's situation or whatever, and that tends to be what we do. Is that our response to mental health, our response to substance use disorder is incarceration, because that's the only tools that we've given our communities to respond to.
Yeah, it's just so unfortunate that is our approach, man. It really is concerning, and we've got to change the trajectory of this this path of how law enforcement addresses mental health. One final question for me, Ryan. You are clearly an unconventional candidate, but as I said, passionate, well-informed, I think obviously very plugged in What is the reaction to your candidacy from the folks that you're campaigning to, or campaigning toward, I guess is the way to say it?
Yeah, I think the response has been really positive. I've seen a lot of people who are not Democrats who are saying like they're going to vote for me or have come out. I've put signs in their yard and those kind of things because they're like, I've never voted Democrat a day in my life, but I know you care about this place and I know you've rolled your sleeves up and you've got your hands in the dirt and you've done the work and that's what's important to me and I know you care about this place. And so that's like the big thing for me is that is like such an honor to hear those stories of someone who in such a
Yeah,
politically divided time, in such a time where we're so like pitted against each other at every turn politically, for someone who is on the other end of the political spectrum in many ways say, I'm voting for you because I know you care about this place and that's what matters most to me is that you're trying to help this place. And so the response has been really good in that regard. I think I'm
beautiful,
really encouraged by it, and I think it's the beginning of something different, if anything else, in our community.
beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, it seems like so what y'all were talking about just a minute ago with having trained professionals accompany police to mental health crisis calls. That was part of this whole defund the police thing that took place, and obviously, the defund the police title that got slapped on this harmed it irreparably. And so a lot of things that were very good ideas within that I think most people would agree with were left to the wayside in this when all that died. And so is have you found some traction with regular folks? And when you say, "Hey, look, we've got to," you see now what the issues could be with our police officers. I've said before, look, I like cops. My whole life, as a white male, the cops have been my friend. I mean, they're really. I get into a bad situation, I'll call the police. I don't have any fear of a cop showing up. But at the same time, I recognize we have, first of all, bestowed a whole lot of power that's unchecked to these guys.
Yeah.
We've also simultaneously asked them to do things that we know they're ill-equipped and ill-trained to do. And I just don't know if the average person now has been so captured by that right-wing bubble when it comes to law enforcement or anybody in uniform, basically, that it's hard to get them to change. Do you feel like what's happened in Walker County has people who would ordinarily be in that right-wing bubble ready to explore some level of change?
Oh, absolutely. I think the majority of people who are calling for justice and accountability in this situation that we see showing up to protests, showing up to vigils, commenting on social media, those are people who are typically, they're not defund the police people. And that's been an
Right.
interesting rhetoric to hear because it's like that's the kind of thing the sheriff department has thrown out, like, oh, these are just defund the police, all this stuff. When the majority of these people are not, they're like longtime voting Republicans, or people who just have no, or supporters of law enforcement who see the corruption and not only see the corruption but just see the gaps and see how the way we're doing things isn't working and we need something different. And so that I want to be honest with you, I think that's one of the most telling things about this whole situation in the last 2.5 years. The thing that's given me so much hope is seeing people say, actually, if we can get past a little bit of all the rhetoric and stuff that we package some of this stuff in and think critically together, we can see that there's other options here and we need to do something different. And if someone like, in my hometown, if our police department here, if every cop on the planet was like the guys we have working in my community, I just, if it was that way at the sheriff's department, none of this would have ever happened in my mind, for sure. I've seen them do amazing things in our community and care about these people. But yeah, you're right. This situation is really brought that to light. And I think for a lot of people, it's allowed them to begin to have conversations to say like, hey, actually, we should be able to fund these police departments to do X, Y, and Z and not expect them to do all this other stuff that they're not equipped to do. And we maybe also can have a conversation about allocating money differently, because like here in
Yeah.
our county, the sheriff department gets 50% of the entire county's budget, and they're constantly telling us it's not enough.
Wow,
Constantly telling us, and they got helicopters and,
wow,
basically it's close to like
what?
military, over militarized,
Yeah.
all these things. And full-time people who are just doing photo ops and videos and social media stuff. And it's like, there's plenty of money here. It's just not being managed well. And if we did take some of that mismanaged money and put it towards like hiring trained professionals to respond to these situations, then maybe we wouldn't have all these lawsuits and all these unneeded deaths and all these things. And people in our community have seen that, I think. And again, most of the people who are out here calling for accountability in our situation are people who I think would say, like, they're back to blue people. Like they would rhetorically use that type of language. But they see the issues and they see that things can be different. And I hate that it's taken this situation to kind of culminate the way that it has for that conversation to begin to happen. But I even see it with some of the leaders that have been open to having those conversations with us about how we could fund something different and how we could reallocate resources and how we could take that burden off the sheriff's department. But again, there are some levels of that, which is a state issue that so far exceeds beyond our county's ability to navigate.
Yeah. No, listen, we've had Sheriff Derek Cunningham on from Montgomery here before, and Derek's a friend of mine, and I think he is probably one of the best public servants that we have working today. And he'll tell you straight up, listen, we're not equipped. Our jails are full half the time with folks who have gone through mental health crises, and we're not, our guys are not equipped to that, and it sets us up for a bad situation. Where we have somebody, that doesn't understand what's going on, handle it in a way that they're trained to handle, somebody who's attacking them, basically, and it just creates violence, basically. And I just it always bothers me the most, I think, when there is clearly a smarter way to do things, and we choose the dumb way. And that seems like what's happened a lot, especially in Walker County, because I've seen them show up in their phony soldier uniforms and stuff. And it just seems like we have encouraged this mindset of an us versus them mentality among the police and law enforcement, especially there. And it's led to some catastrophic results. Where does that situation stand now in Walker County? Where do you sense there are some changes that are gonna occur I know the sheriff got arrested, so I mean I'm assuming something is gonna happen there at some point, but are there some meaningful changes coming?
Yeah, I definitely think at the very least we'll see a change in leadership, whether that's because of the court systems or because of the court of public opinion at the next election. Even though he's still adamantly running and has plenty of supporters. The Tony Mitchell case is still ongoing, and they're working their way up the ladder, it seems. And so we'll see how all that goes. The arrest came for a totally different thing. And to get into it, it's not just the under resourced stuff, but like in that situation, they fired a investigator who was investigating negligence and law breaking that was happening inside the jail, and they fired him as kind of because he was a whistleblower. He tried to bring it to their attention, and they fired him for it because they already knew that they had officers running around who were not state certified and were denied state certification. And so there's just all these levels that are there, but I do think we'll see change. And I'm a little ambivalent about the election overall because a new candidate, a new person behind the helm doesn't necessarily mean things will change. There's a culture there in the jail. The sheriff will even testify there's been a culture there long before he got there. Unfortunately, he just didn't do anything to change it. And so again, when it comes to whoever's coming next, I guess we'll have to see. I know, as far as us, the next election, whoever gets elected, we're gonna let them know outright, all eyes are on you, and you got a big job, you got a huge job to do. I can't imagine the task of reforming that department, the kind of task that would be to do that. But it's got to happen. We're just at the point where something's got to give, no matter what, even no matter who gets in there or what happens with the unfolding court cases. But I do think as a community, we're not gonna settle for anything less than change.
Yeah. Well, good. And listen, man, great work all the way around. it's no matter what happens Tuesday with the election. I think that what you've done so far is really going to change the community, and I think will change the way a lot of people look at public servants and what they expect out of elected leaders, and what they expect out of even candidates going forward. And hopefully it will mean change all the way up and down the line. And hopefully, somebody will be taking you to buy a suit on Wednesday, and we'll get a nice suit for you out of the whole deal. But man, thanks Ryan for coming on and spending some time with us.
Yeah, thank y'all so much. This is great. Glad
All
to be
right,
here.
Ryan, take it
Absolutely.
easy.
That is Ryan Cagle. He's running. Listen, if you're in that area in District 5 and that's in it race, and just go and vote. Go and vote for Ryan, and I don't think you're going to be disappointed. He's a candidate that will represent that district and the people around there very, very well, and actually listen to the working folks who live and are trying to survive in that area. All right, we're going to slide out. We'll come back, wrap this thing up in just a minute. It's Alabama Politics This Week. We're back in a minute. Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person. Our thanks to Ryan Cagle for spending a few minutes with us. Wish him well. Listen, you heard the passion from the guy. You heard the intelligence that he has in regards to his community and how much he knows about people there and how much he knows about the situation and what sort of work and effort he's put into making that a better community. Who the hell else would you want to vote for? I mean, honest to God, if you're a person living in that community, who else would you want to vote for?
That his passion really just impressed me so much. He seems to be a truly caring individual, and I think at the local level, it really should be less about partisanship and more about who's just going to be a good public servant.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he strikes me as someone who would do that.
I think at every level it should be that, man. I mean, listen, I'm all for the party, and I think, but part of the people need to remember what you got into the party thing for. I mean, the party stood for certain things, whether or not you believed in them or not. And if people that the party are putting up don't believe in those things any longer, then I mean, come on. So. Before I move on, because I know that you want to do my favorite thing, which is quote me. But I also want to thank the folks at Wind Creek Entertainment for sponsoring. Thank the folks at Southern Poverty Law Center for sponsoring, and for all of our listeners for hanging with us, and the extra subscribers that we continue to pick up, and the folks for continuing to click on these things and listen to good conversation and to interviews with people that you don't hear anywhere else. I mean, where else are you going to hear Ryan Cagle? Okay, where else are you going to hear about the actual issues that are taking place in Walker County, and not just read some of the stories from the folks that drop in to write about them overnight, and I think that we really appreciate you guys for hanging in there with us. So all right,
Absolutely.
go ahead and quote me now, David.
Yeah, man, and as I've made it no secret that I've been a fan of your columns for many years, well before we actually met personally. I interviewed you a few times on the radio, which you forgot because I guess I just wasn't big enough, important enough. You remember all your MSNBC interviews, but you don't remember those that I did with you. But that's okay. That's
my God, this is bad. David has really made me have to be an asshole this entire show. I mean, I forgot him. I forgot going to do the speech with him. Left him hanging out by himself. Now I've forgotten him in the radio interviews, and I've treated David poorly, very, very poorly.
Well, I'm glad you're. Confession
I have no
is good for the
excuses
soul.
either. I hope
Confession
people.
is good for the soul.
I hope I get at least some credit for not even attempting to make an excuse about any of these things, because I'm not, and I've fallen on the sword completely and apologized profusely.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. You have continued though, and I mean this in all kidding aside. You have continued in my mind as a fan. I've been reading newspaper columns since I was a child. I mean, this is an art form that I've cultivated over 60 years of probably 50 years more accurately, of appreciation for. And I'm a big fan of your column writing. I think your columns for Alabama, the Alabama Political Reporter, in my mind, and I'm saying this hand to God, all sincerity, it's essential reading. And here's one of the reasons why. In the column that you just published, I think it was a few days ago, I think, you were talking about the situation in Walker County, which we were just talking to Ryan about. And you said something here that just resonated with me, and I think really epitomizes the importance of being on the right side of this issue, and also the differences between those of us who see it one way and those of us who see it the other way. You said, call me crazy, but I'd much rather have thousands of gay immigrant drag queens in schools passing out books with stories about transgender athletes triumphing than have a single uncertified officer roaming school hallways with a loaded firearm. When I saw that paragraph, Josh, it really jumped out at me because it really epitomizes, I think, the key differences between so many of us on these issues. You got people that are worried about, people who are, men who are dressed up as women, and the celebration of, literally the microscopic percentage of trans athletes that are out there. And it truly is a microscopic percentage. And we got people that are building whole political movements around what really is literally a handful of people in the whole country. Mm-hmm. And even drag queens. I mean, drag queens probably don't even constitute 1% of the U.S. population.
Oh,
probably
I
something like
I bet they don't constitute 0.1% of the.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Yeah,
it could be 1/10 of 1% or something like that. I mean, and yet we build whole political movements out of this, and yet when it comes to things that can be catastrophically tragic, like unqualified people, in our schools with weapons. We're putting them in there with the care, ostensibly to care for our children. And we don't get upset about that kind of stuff. What's going on in Walker County, what we were talking with Ryan about, there's not enough outrage about that. There's not enough urgency about that. And that paragraph there, to me, really, really hits the nail on the head, Josh, about what our mindset ought to be as opposed to what it actually is. And I really just felt like that should be highlighted in our podcast. And I hope that the people that listen to this podcast are already reading your columns. And if they're not, they should be. Yeah. They should be looking for them every week.
Well, first of all, thank you. That does mean a lot. It always does mean a lot. Although I am conditioned through years of receiving terrible emails and phone calls to only have a response available for the negative commentary that I receive, and so I have no idea how to deal with positive. So we'll shoot past that very quickly. But do know that I appreciate it, and it is something that I really kind of helps me keep doing it all the time.
Yeah, man. You need to do that. Keep it up.
Man, I appreciate your words, but I think honestly, Wanda Sykes said it better. Until a drag queen comes into a school and beats a child to death with a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, then I'm not going to give a shit about that before I give a shit about the guns that are in there. And that's, and I could have said, forget uncertified. I don't want a cop with a gun, with a loaded weapon roaming around the hallways of the schools. It honestly, there have been so many instances where mistakes have been made. Okay, there were a couple of instances where the resource officer at the school left the handgun in the bathroom. Okay. Where it accidentally discharged, where, the accidents happen. And when you introduce firearms around kids, they happen way more often. Okay. And that's, I get, believe me, You have no idea how much I get because I watched that little backpack go bobbing off out when I let her out of my car. Okay.
Sure, man. Yeah,
and so I get it. I do. But to me, you've got to play the percentage game to be smart about things. And the percentages say you introduce a gun into that school every single day, no matter how the good intentions of the person who's carrying it or who's there or what the good intentions were of placing it there, you're far more likely to have a catastrophic result than you are from one of the mass shootings that occur in this country.
Let me ask you a quick question about that, because I think that's an interesting, valid viewpoint, especially from someone who still has a child in the school system. I don't. My son is 30 years old, so I'm way removed from that. Is your position that you don't want the officers carrying loaded weapons, or is your position you don't want the officers themselves in the schools?
I would love for the officers to be there. I would prefer that the officer not have a loaded weapon in the school. As I've said many times before, look, there have obviously we know I've been critical of police officers, in Decatur, in Huntsville, and Montgomery, in Walker County, in Hansville, and whatever the Brookside place was. I've been critical of a lot of them. Okay, but I also have a lot of really good friends of mine who are law enforcement. Who have done the toughest jobs and who I have the utmost respect for. And I have respect for all of the officers who do the job the right way. Okay.
Right.
And I don't listen. Here's the thing. I don't think I and those officers disagree on what the right thing, quote unquote, is. The right way. I don't think we disagree. I don't think we disagree at all on how these things should be handled. I think people get caught up a lot of times in the structure of that, and that's where the differences come. But so I respect the fact that, and I know the school resource officer at my child's school. I do. I know him. And I have no doubt that he is a good person. I know him. I knew the lady before him. Both of them, I think, are qualified, well-meaning people who I would love to have in that spot in a crisis situation. I just wish that there was a way that he could be there and have a firearm nearby in case of an incident, but not have a loaded firearm in the school. Even if it was just a situation where it was the firearm in the holster and the ammunition elsewhere on his person, that would be more.
That would alleviate some of your concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like that is. Yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem. I think that the chances of him doing something dumb are minuscule. Right. But the chances go up because he's there every single day. Every single day he's there with that loaded firearm in that school, and the chances go up every single time he walks through the door with it. They just do. It's just a fact. It's just a mathematical fact.
I get you. And I don't disagree with your concern or your position. There's probably a better way to do that. I will say my initial response to school resource officers was negative. I didn't think they should be in the schools until I started talking to, this was some years back, one with whom, an officer that I was friends with. And one day I actually walked with him, spent like an afternoon with him.
Yeah.
Walking around. And I knew this guy to be a caring guy, right. Anyway, and great man, Carl McDuffie, great man, great police officer. And as we walked through the old Butler High School, what used to be Butler High School in Huntsville, I learned a lot about the role that he really played there. And he was a lot less police officer and a lot more uncle or big brother to those young people.
Yeah.
And it really opened my eyes to the good that could come if it's the right officer with the right spirit and with a sympathy for those young people, man, they can do a lot of good.
Yeah,
but but I also agree with what you're saying. There probably is a.
Listen.
In
I'm not
terms of
in
the
any
weapon,
way. Yeah, I'm not in
yeah.
any way putting any of those folks down. Okay, I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not.
yeah.
It's just the introduction. I feel the same way about the gun in the house. It's the more you have it, the more guns you have in the house, the higher the percentage goes up. The more often that gun is sitting around loaded somewhere, the more the higher the chance is for something catastrophic to happen. It's just a fact. Yep. It's just an absolute fact. Right. But I will say. The one thing about the school resource officer program that I do think is a negative is we have criminalized a lot of behaviors that happen in schools that previously were handled as simple school system disciplinary actions.
That's right.
And I think we have set a lot of kids off on a pathway to jail that never ever would have gone on it had we handled these things as we did in the past. And people will tell you, well, the kids are different these days than they were. And look, and maybe to some degree, maybe. But you know what? I think in a lot of cases they're different because of the way we treat them. All right. And I think the environment is now, that's what's changing the kids. Kids haven't changed. All right. The way it's the environment in which they have been raised and in which they've been treated. That's what's changed. That's what's conditioned the kids a little differently. And I think that if we get back to this, and especially when I see kids getting, arrested in middle school, I mean, come the hell on, man. Come on, y'all. We got to do something better than that. And that's the reason why I was against the cell phone ban in the schools. Listen, if the school systems wanted to ban cell phones, I'm perfectly fine with that. But it can't be a criminal offense. It can't be a criminal offense to have the cell phones in the school. It's something that should be handled with a disciplinary action. You spend a couple of days in ISS. This is the way. I don't understand our mindset.
If even that, I mean, I don't know. Just
repeat offender. I'm talking about at the max. I'm talking about the max. A multiple time offender or whatever. You spend. You know what I mean? I mean, but we're not calling the police over this. It's just
right.
I hate the way that's been done. All right, real quick before we get to the right wing nut, because we want to talk about that for a minute as well, because it kind of ties into what we're talking about here. But I want to talk about Bruce Pearl. For a moment. There have been a couple of stories by some right-wing publications out there that have, and I'm not even putting down the right-wing publications in this particular instance because they were stories that were they quoted some leaders of the Republican Party, and Bruce Pearl is considering getting into the U.S. Senate race, running for Tommy Tuberville's old seat. If you know Bruce Pearl, he's the head coach, the Auburn basketball head coach. He's a Republican, would run on the Republican ticket. He is right wing in a lot of his beliefs and things that he says, but the Republicans are fighting against this, and I think what we see here is a concerted effort to help Steve Marshall and in his bid for that seat, because John Wall came out this week and said that we might have a problem with he didn't mention Bruce Pearl by name. He wasn't specific to this, but he talked about how it's the party's responsibility to keep non-Republicans off of the Republican ticket, which is utter bullshit if you actually think about it. And I can explain deeper. But what they're actually talking about in this case is they're talking about keeping Pearl off because Pearl gave a $1,000 donation to a Democrat in North Carolina through a PAC, through a pro-Israel PAC. And that's really Bruce Pearl's primary concern, is his Jewish heritage and in Israel, defending Israel. And he also gave $1,000 to Shamari Figures through the same PAC. And so they're talking about keeping him off because one of the party rules states that they can keep a candidate off of the ballot if he has donated to Democratic candidates in the past. Now, they're doing this under the guise of assisting Steve Marshall, basically. That's what it appears, is that they got their hand out here for Steve Marshall because the AG, and he's the guy that is their boy. Steve Marshall, in case you don't know, was once a Democrat. Not all that long ago. Was the Democratic District Attorney of Marshall County. Not only that, was a big donor to the Obama campaign. I mean, the hypocrisy of it is kind of off the charts. But there have also been other stories about Bruce Pearl leading the Black Lives Matter protest at Auburn when he went with his team, with his players, during the Black Lives Matter movement after the George Floyd murder in Minnesota. Yeah.
And Nick Saban did the same thing.
Nick Saban did the same thing. And there's also a photo of Bruce Pearl kneeling with his players at one of the rallies that was held. And I'll say this about Bruce Pearl. And I probably will write this at some point as well. I feel like Pearl, because of what Tommy Tuberville has done, Bruce Pearl is going to get a bad rap with a lot of people because they're going to view him as another Auburn coach hopping in a race where he doesn't belong, where we got a bunch of coaches and stuff. And listen, I don't agree with Bruce Pearl on most of the stuff, but I will say, Bruce Pearl is at least engaged in politics. He is at least engaged in issues. He is at least spending time studying things that are going on and is speaking for himself and the issues that he cares about. And it seems as though he has been willing in the past to shirk partisanship in donating to at least a couple of Democrats, because those Democrats were also favorable to the one cause that he cares about. The one real cause that he cares about out there. And that cause is understandable given his background, and his religious beliefs. And so, I think that if I had to choose a Republican in this particular race, I don't think that we could actually do much better than Bruce Pearl, in terms of somebody who might actually give a damn, who might actually take his experience. This has been my problem with Tommy Tuberville, by the way. Okay, I don't dislike Tommy Tuberville just because he chose the Republican ticket. All right, I dislike Tommy Tuberville because he has sat in the living room of thousands of impoverished kids and families over the years, and somehow when he got to the Senate, he forgot about doing all that shit. He forgot about what their struggles were and how good those people were and some of the promises he made to those people and how much they valued their kids and their children and the sacrifices that they made for them. And he's done nothing for them in the Senate. That's been my problem. I don't think Bruce Pearl would be that way, but maybe he would fool me, but I don't think he would be that way.
Well, I don't know. I know very little about Bruce Pearl. What I do know, I don't like. But and I'm talking about politics, not as a person. I don't know what he's like as a person. So this is not personal. This is just about his politics. Don't care for his politics. But if you're telling me, as somebody who is much more familiar with Pearl than I am, that he's a competent person who would do a competent job, even if we disagreed with his political positions, I would much rather have a Bruce Pearl in there than a Steve Marshall.
Yeah,
whose politics I think have been has scraped the bottom of the barrel as Attorney General, and I think he's been like some other Republican Attorney Generals. Quite frankly, I think he's been a vampire. He's reveled in the use of the death penalty. Been very, I think really most of the, including the governor, who there's some things I've liked about Kay Ivey through the years, but I think they've all been really ridiculously cavalier about taking lives in this state using the death penalty. And to me, that is reprehensible. So if Bruce Pearl's a better choice, then great. Hopefully he'll get the nomination, if they don't block him from being on the ballot. But again, I'm no big fan of his.
Well, I'm no big fan either. I'm just looking at the lesser of the evils, and that's all I'm trying to make a judgment on here is the lesser of the evils.
Yeah.
And I just feel like and like I said, my problems with Steve Marshall are some of the same that I've had with Tommy Tuberville. I feel like he had an opportunity to do things that would have really helped a lot of Alabamians, and he chose to help himself in a lot of regards. I don't just dislike people because they have a label out beside their name. There are many Republicans in this state who I respect and admire because of some of the things that they do and that they value and the care that they put into the job. No matter if I disagree with what they're doing in the job, I still feel like if you can articulate and have a conversation with me and explain why you feel like you need to do this and how it's going to help people, then okay, you know what? I mean, we may disagree, but man, I still value you as a person, and I don't feel like for a lot of what Steve Marshall has done, he can do that, and it's the same with Tommy Tuberville, and that's been the problem that I've had. And speaking of which, our right wing nut kind of goes along on the same lines here, and that is Jay Mitchell, who's a Alabama Supreme Court justice currently, and is going to give that up apparently to run for the Attorney General's seat that Marshall is vacating. And I suppose Mitchell is trying to prove himself as a true right winger, and so he's been out doing different things. And one of the things he did was write an op-ed that appeared around in some different places, and in which he talks about the lawlessness that's taking place in California. And now, of course, he's not talking about the lawlessness of masked supposed federal agents warrantlessly entering homes and whatnot, and businesses and absconding people from off the streets, or just taking them off the streets and without any sort of identification most of the time or cause. But he's talking about the pushback, the riots, as they were, that broke out in a couple of places around L.A. And he describes them, the torched buildings, which were there torched buildings in L.A.? I don't remember there being.
I don't remember seeing any torched buildings, but
I do. Yeah. I know that there was some looting that went on one night that I saw, which is terrible. I mean, I never understood that aspect of things and why people think that's okay. But and so there have been some other behaviors that were not good, that quite frankly were criminal behaviors that people should have been arrested for. But but then he expands that out, and he says that California Governor Gavin Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass have done nothing to end them, which of course is completely and utterly false. Yeah. I mean, just completely and utterly a lie, straight out a lie. And he goes on through this and talks about, the left-wing media enablers have painted the real problem in this lawlessness is Donald Trump, which they're wrong, and he praises Donald Trump for his actions and the way he's been able to do certain things. And I mean, it's really confusing to me to have a Supreme Court justice, a current Supreme Court justice, criticizing lawlessness while praising a man who's been convicted of 34 felonies. Okay,
exactly.
Not to mention that's the things he's been convicted of. Not to mention the scam university that he ran. Not to mention the charity that they can no longer run because they were misusing the funds. All of the rape, basically an adjudicated rapist. And
not to mention that he fomented what ultimately became the January 6th insurrection.
Exactly.
I mean, that was about as lawless. That was probably the quintessential act of lawlessness that Trump is associated with, at least that we know of. I mean, there's some, the Epstein stuff, if he really is, tied into that stuff, that could be, in my mind, even worse because, you're talking about victimizing, young people. But I mean, January 6th, I mean, man, come on. Was that not lawless?
Well, of course it was. I mean, it was the ultimate lawless, but, all that's bad. All that's bad, and all of that would be probably enough to make Mitchell a right-wing nut. But he also goes in this op-ed, and talks about Alabama's crime because Gavin Newsom, rightfully, when Tommy Tuberville took a shot at him in California, said, hey, bro, how about you stick to football? Alabama has a crime rate, 3 times ours. And he's right. A murder rate 3 times ours. And he's right about that. But, of course, Mitchell pins that on the liberal Democratic-run cities in Alabama, and the policies that they have employed, and the fact that they've not taken this tough on crime approach that has been proven to work in the past. And one of the examples he uses, and this is what makes him a true right-wing nut, one of the examples he uses is the crime reduction efforts that took place in Los Angeles in the 90s and New York City in the 80s and 90s. And you know what? He's right that there were crime reduction efforts that were very, very, very successful in both locations. But what he's wrong about is the fundamental premise that what they went in and did was say to everybody that we're going to lock them up. We're going to lock up these criminals. That's not at all what they did. That's not at all what, to his credit, even though he turned into an absolute lunatic, Rudy Giuliani did. And it's not what the folks in LA did back in the 90s. And I know this because I spent all of 15 minutes Googling that shit, which apparently Jay Mitchell couldn't be bothered to do. And what they actually did was start community policing efforts.
I was going to say.
They went into the communities and they talked to people, and they started with gang deterrent efforts, not lock them up and throw away the key efforts, but to go in and study the root causes of what pushes kids into the gangs and to stop those things. They also created community nights and neighborhood initiatives. They also went out and trained their officers to walk beats within the neighborhoods and get to know the people and talk to people. All of the things that Randall Woodfin and Stephen Reed, and to his credit here recently, Tommy Battle up in Huntsville, all of the things that they have done and talked about lowering the crime rates in their cities. Not the bullshit, lock them up, throw away the key, which we've been trying in the state of Alabama for generations. And we somehow still have the highest incarceration rate in the world.
Yeah, because law and order is working so well here. We have a penchant for the punitive.
Yes.
And that's what you find with the right-wing mindset. There's that penchant for the punitive, as opposed to cultivating relationships, trying to get to the root issues. And, as many sociologists and others will tell you, the bottom line with crime often is poverty. There's a direct correlation between poverty and crime. You address poverty, in so many cases you address crime.
Education, man.
And education is tied into that as well.
Yeah, listen, as I've told people a million times, it's one of my favorite lines that I ever came up with, which is, very rarely has anyone's home been broken into by someone with a master's degree.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen. Or even a college degree of any kind.
Right.
It just doesn't. You give people those opportunities and impress upon them what is valuable in life, and those things make a difference. And it all ties together with parts of the community and how you approach people. Listen, if you're going to tell me you cannot hold these two beliefs, okay? You cannot hold that life is precious. Okay, that life is so precious that we can't have abortions, we can't have this because that life is precious, and it's going to be, we have an opportunity there, and then immediately then believe upon birth that person is an evil human. Okay, all right, because that's the only way we get to this crime and punishment idea that you have, is if you believe from birth that is an evil human being. Okay, because they're not, and they are conditioned by their environment just like all the rest of us are. All right? And until you change that environment, it's never going to work.
So as we're wrapping up, I'm just going to say one exception to your very eloquent argument is the television show Friends and Neighbors starring John Hamm on Apple Plus. Have you seen that?
I've seen it advertised. I've not gotten to it yet, though.
Man, that's a great show. It's a great show. But he is the college-educated burglar for sure in that show.
John Hamm aside,
yes.
And, I think if we educated enough folks and got enough of them degrees and stuff, I think we could really cut the crime rates right on down. But all right, I think that's it for us. So until next week, y'all be safe out there.
Peace.